Well, I mean, look, what do geeks do? We rank stuff. So to my last bit of business relating to Series 11 of Doctor Who, I'm going to rank the episodes we've got. If you're wondering about this, if you didn't know, I live in Vermont. We're in the middle of a cold snap. I'm freezing. So, a little addition to the costume then. So, yes, I'm going to take all 8 episodes of Series 11 and give my ranking of them from worst to best. Now, couple things about this. I am only dealing with these relative to each other. So don't, realize that this is just within this season. I debated waiting for the New Year's special to happen. Ultimately, I decided, when I rank series, I don't usually include the special. So I decided not to wait for it. And ultimately, it was weird kind of working it out because what I came away with at the end, having broken these down, is that there are 3 episodes I really like, 2 episodes I really don't, and 5 that are either middling or I have very mixed feelings about, like good and bad kind of canceling each other out. Which, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, not the best percentage in the world, but there is stuff that I legitimately liked, and you'll tell when we get there. But let's get to it. So, starting at the bottom, number 10, Arachnids in the UK. There was almost nothing I liked about this episode. I mean, it just... there was there was one thing that was nice about it. There was a nice kind of creepy atmosphere early on. That's about it. There was no particularly interesting character stuff going on. The fact that it's going to be spiders is spoiled by the title alone, so there's only so much tension even that decent atmosphere can give you. The explanation was cheap and cheesy for what they were and why they were there, especially considering this is a show with large spiders as part of its history, and you went with nuclear waste and genetic tampering mutations, and then there's the character that Chris Noth plays. He was so pointless and pointed. He was very obviously making very specific points, but they didn't contribute to the episode. Like, I don't have a problem with character who's largely there to, make some sort of point, as long as that point is one that it's strengthening a larger point being made by the episode. And this episode, like, plot-wise, is largely just a filler episode, and then they plunk this guy down in the middle of it. Oh, God! It hurt. Did not like this one at all. Going up from that, number 9, the Saranga Conundrum. Now, this one I didn't actively dislike as much as Arachnids in the UK, but this one is aggressively mediocre. Like, aside from the fact that, as I mentioned in almost every episode, it looks good for the most part, one specific thing, there is almost nothing that stands out about it that is particularly good. About the only thing that I liked was I kind of liked the way the chief medical character was sort of pushing back and challenging the doctor a little bit, but then he's gone from the story and, then we don't have that anymore. And the whole thing with the Pating, which, stupid name, beyond that, this, it looks like Stitch. It's this little thing that's doing a ton of damage and is really dangerous. And I mentioned this in my review, and more than a few people in the comments were like, well, no, but sometimes that can happen, and the contrast is interesting. I'm like, it's interesting on paper. The execution doesn't work, though, because the way it feels to watch it feels like the actors weren't told what it was going to look like, and it feels like they are reacting to something that looks much more dangerous than this thing actually looks. And so it just creates a disconnect, and it's just one more thing that didn't work in an episode that, like I said, aside from the Pating, which I can point to as a flat-out fall down, none of the rest of it just really does much. It's just kind of there. It's the epitome of filler, but unlike good filler, there's no shining thing in it to raise it a little bit. It's just flatline filler. So going up from that, we get to number 8. The Woman Who Fell to Earth. Now, I don't actually actively dislike The Woman Who Fell to Earth. There's actually a pretty big gulf between my number 9 and my number 8, but this is how they landed. And while I did, for the most part, enjoy this episode and liked it well enough, even going back and revisiting it, having seen the series finale, it just doesn't have a lot that clicks with me for whatever reason. It just, I don't know. This one's really hard for me to nail down why it doesn't quite work, but it doesn't get me there right off the bat. It feels very much like a setup, and I mean that's part of the thing, which is that it's setting up new Doctor and 3 new companions, plus the new sonic screwdriver and all this stuff all at once, and it again, a little bit like the Saranga Conundrum, nothing's really getting the proper chance to shine because it's so much loaded in. Like if I were to make a comparison, and I think it's a valid one to make, to the 11th Hour, which also had a crap ton of stuff to establish right off the bat, because new Doctor, new companion, new status quo, no holdover characters or anything like that. It managed to have the Doctor and the companion shine because it was laser focused on that relationship and that dynamic. Here, there's focus on, Ryan and Graham and Graham's and Grace on their dynamic, and we get a little bit of Yaz, and then here's the Doctor, and it doesn't coalesce. It's like it's a bit of individual moving parts, but it's almost like they're moving independent of each other. So going up from there, we get to number 7. We get to Rosa. Now, Rosa, I did 2 videos reviewing Rosa because for things relating to my own life and my own sort of issues that I deal with and the way I look at the world and stuff going on at the moment, the episode on first viewing I thought was decent, but something didn't sit quite right, and that sat worse and worse and worse as time went on. Then once I identified what it was, I did the second video. I'm actually a little bit nicer on it now than I was when I did that second video. I haven't turned around, but my feelings on Rosa as an episode are complicated. I admire what it's trying to do, and I would even say that for the most part it does it well. There's just a few things about it that for me personally, with my package and stuff that I deal with, weighed on me in a bad way. One thing that I will retract from my second video that I did on this episode is that I kind of wrapped that video up by saying maybe they just shouldn't have done this episode or tried to do this story, because I don't think Doctor Who is equipped to do what they were trying to accomplish. I am going to retract that because, again, limiting it to the conversation that I had in my own comments section, I don't know how bad it was elsewhere. This is why I don't venture out into other areas of fandom all that often. But I did really appreciate the conversation that happened. So even if ultimately I feel for me that Rosa doesn't quite work, I really did appreciate the conversation that you folks had, that I got to have with you about that, about what it was doing. So for that reason, I no longer feel that Doctor Who shouldn't have done it. I still do feel that, again, for my part, it doesn't quite work. All right, so then we get up to number 6, and that is The Witchfinders. Now, The Witchfinders goes along pretty well and does decently, basically until we get the identification on the mud monster aliens, and it's really rushed towards the end. It reminds me a lot of Power of Three in that respect, where it's got a setup and a premise that it builds around and it does a lot with, and then once we identify what the alien threat is, that just gets crammed into this tiny ass space of time, and it doesn't do it any favors. So but there is good stuff in here. I think the general build up until we get more about the alien menace is done very well. I think Alan Cumming is quite good. I did really like the speech that the Doctor kind of has, directed at him when she's, kind of tied up. And so, there is good stuff in here. It just kind of falls apart a little bit at the end. So moving on from there, we have number 5, The Ghost Monument, which I did enjoy a pretty decent amount. But on a rewatch, I recognize that a big part of my uptick from The Woman Who Fell to Earth was it felt more like what I wanted a regular episode of Doctor Who to feel like. If I actually try and break this episode down into its component parts, it's not doing much. And I can't say that there's actually all that much about it that's all that great, other than just to say that for me, it just felt right. I liked the feel and the vibe and of the episode overall, and that kind of glossed over some things that were not as strong as they could have been. But there is a fair bit that I like here. I actually really like the guy who's running the contest. I like that sort of aloofness he has to him. That made him a really interesting sort of almost villain, not quite villain kind of character. I was enjoying, what was going on with the Doctor in terms of that desperation. That moment of in front of her getting in front of the TARDIS was really nice because for whatever reason, it's super obvious in hindsight. For whatever reason, I didn't call that the Ghost Monument was going to be the TARDIS. So seeing the flickering image of the TARDIS, I was like, ooh. So there's little moments like that just do a little bit to boost me along through an episode that I think is decent. So moving on, we get to number 4, and that brings us to, hold on, let me see if I can say this right. The Battle of Ranskoon Av Kolos. Yeah, these names, Chibnall, come on. So the series finale, which has a fair amount of decent stuff in it. Some of which actually pays off things that weren't properly built. So, I like the villain, Tim Shaw, here way better than I liked him in The Woman Who Fell to Earth. But the thing is, I feel like he either needed to be better done there, or we needed another appearance of him somewhere in the middle, because I feel like we're getting a build-up and a payoff to a villain who is not built up as much as the episode is pretending like he's built up. But it had Mark Addy, which is always a good thing for me. I finally clicked with this Doctor and got a sense of who she was. I was like, oh, okay. So I finally had my moment where I get you. Yes, you are the Doctor. Literally, it was the very last thing she said before going in the TARDIS. So talk about going down to the wire. But that was nice to finally see and finally feel. And I also quite enjoyed Graham's moments, both his sort of determination and the threat of him going dark, and then also the lightness of him, you shot him, well, only in the foot. I liked that. That was a lot of fun. There are hiccups, and I talked about them in my review. I'm getting to the more positive end of the list, so I don't want to dwell on them too much. But yeah, there are little hiccups, little things, little bits in the way the story was told that I'm like, there had to have been a better way to do that, or that wasn't necessary, or I don't like that trope. But overall, it does work for me. So now we're gonna get into the 3 that I do legitimately just like. And this is not to say that they're perfect episodes, but I don't really have reservations about these last 3. So, number 3, Kerblam. Feel-wise, in terms of the feel and the vibe and the movement and the momentum of the episode, this is what I want to be the standard in Doctor Who. And I feel like this is the vibe that most episodes should have, because it is a fun, fast-moving adventure with a little bit of mystery and in a cool, interesting location. And that setup is that's just great Doctor Who to me. That is a setup that works really well. I really like the Doctor's enthusiasm. I like Ryan sort of immediately going, oh yeah, I know what working this kind of gig is like. Graham has some nice tender moments. I don't know if it was a ton, but I know some people took issue with the villain either as a character or sort of his motivation and like how that may have muddled messaging for the episode and what it was trying to say. I get that, but even like thinking back on it, I'm like, I still really like it. And this is something that I've said before, like if messaging that even if I take on board, the version of sort of the subtext that some people have gone for, and it may be right, or certainly if it's what you took from it, then it's valid for you, absolutely. But like for me, not only did I not quite go there, but even if I do, like I am kind of the disposition that, well, if good intentions and messaging I agree with don't save a bad product, because they don't, then there's only so much I'm going to hold core messaging that I disagree with against something that I think is really good. I mean, that's not to say like everything gets a pass. If it's, I'm not I'm not going to be singing the praises of the original Birth of a Nation film, because like that was atrocious messaging. But there's wiggle room there for me. But that's me. I did really enjoy this episode. I had fun. That was my big thing with Kerblam. Kerblam was fun. So moving up, we get to number 2. Demons of the Punjab. I think this was the episode that had the most emotional resonance for me personally. And there's a number of reasons for that, but I mean, part of it is sort of relating it to my own relationships with older members of my family and feeling like I don't know their stories as well as I could or probably should. And sort of seeing that play out and feel that sense. And I mean, this is the one episode where Yaz, I think, does actually get shine as a companion, because I think she was very badly underused. I feel bad for Yaz as a character, because I feel like if she was the only companion, I'd probably like her a lot, but the show doesn't seem to have a lot of use for her. But she gets nicely focused here, and it's focused on an aspect of history that I genuinely knew almost nothing about and found fascinating in a slightly depressing manner, because it wasn't pleasant, but I thought it was well presented. I thought the guest characters were well done. I thought what was going on with the aliens turned out to be, at the end of the day, fairly interesting as well. The Doctor is a little bit of a passenger in this episode. It doesn't feel like she has all that much to do, which doesn't automatically make an episode bad. There are good, Doctor Light episodes. But for my part, I still felt like I had been waiting like to get to know her, and so to see her put on the back burner before I'd had that moment, that gave me a little frustration. And that's probably the one reason this didn't take the top spot, because like I said, this one had the strongest emotional resonance for me. But I'm gonna end up giving my top spot to It Takes You Away. This one was interesting because when it was over, I was like, that's weird, and I think I like it. But yeah, it was one of those initial reactions that at a later date could have really gone either way. Coming away from it and thinking on it and revisiting it, it could have been a case of, no, I actually don't like it. It was just so weird I didn't know how else to process it. Or it could go, not only do I like this, I really like this, which is what it ended up being. It was funny. I didn't make the mental connection, but more than a few commenters compared it to Douglas Adams, which I think is probably a big part of why I really liked it. I think the reason I didn't clock that in my head was because I associate Douglas Adams so strongly with humor, and it's not an especially funny episode. A couple little moments, a couple little things, but it doesn't have the same level of humor behind the absurdism. It's more just bizarre. But then I thought about it like, this is kind of very Douglas Adams minus the humor and wordplay flourishes that he would tend to do all over his work. So yeah, that and sort of seeing that, and more than a few people said that, that goes like, oh yeah, maybe that's why it worked so well for me. So yeah, that was my favorite episode of Series 11, and that's not just by comparison. I think that was a genuinely great episode of Doctor Who. I get why some people don't like it. It is weird. It is a weird episode, but it was precisely my kind of weird. So that's why it's my pick for the number 1 episode. So, since this is just a ranking of Series 11, whatever your thoughts are for your favorite, your least favorite, or if you want to rank the whole series, go for it. I would appreciate it if you wouldn't show up in the comments just to dunk on the series and go, they were all crap. Like, if that's where your mindset's at, I'm not saying you have to lighten up. Like, I'm sorry you didn't enjoy it, but like, let the rest of us try and have a little fun, okay? There's been a lot of trolling going on lately, and I'm not a fan. My block list is getting long. I don't like adding to it. So in any case, whatever your thoughts were on Series 11, ranking, your best, your worst, the whole thing, whatever you want to do, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about a whole bunch of stuff you can do, because there's buttons and links, including one to my Patreon. If you feel like supporting me that way, it will be a really big help. And if you don't want to check that out, that's okay. There's other links down below as well. Twitter and link to my book. My P.O. box is down there. Somebody asked during the last live stream. You don't want to look at any of that? That's okay too, because you know what? At the end of the day, you're the council. I just run the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.